She was sent to die with them. They called her a treaty, a sacrificial lamb wrapped in silk and lies. Lyanna Vire, unwanted Omega bride to the most feared Alpha King in the northern frontier, arrived at Bloodridge Keep as a storm clawed the mountains. Inside those ancient stone walls, warriors were dying, not from battle, from something silent, something spreading like poison through their veins. Draven Kyle, the Alpha who never bowed, watched his pack collapse while his pride kept him from begging for help. But Lyanna didn't come to beg. She came with a secret that could save them all, or destroy two kingdoms. Stay until the end to see how one forbidden choice changes everything. Drop your city in the comments and hit that like button. The wind screamed across the Blackthorn Mountains like a wounded animal. Lyanna pressed her palm against the frozen carriage window, watching jagged peaks tear through the storm clouds. Ice pelted the glass. The temperature had dropped so violently in the last hour that frost now crept across the interior walls, crystallizing her breath in the air. "We're close," the driver muttered from his perch. His voice carried no warmth, just duty. She didn't respond. There was nothing to say. The truth sat heavy in her chest. She was being delivered like cargo, a peace offering. A pretty little Omega wrapped in treaty paper and sent north to marry a king she'd never met, to save a homeland that had never wanted her. The Kingdom of Vire had made its choice. War with the mountain packs would cost too much blood, too many resources. So instead, they'd sent her, Lyanna, the forgotten daughter of a disgraced noble house. Quiet, unremarkable, expendable. "Sacrificial lamb," her cousin had sneered the night before her departure. "At least you'll be useful for once." Lyanna had said nothing then, either. She'd learned long ago that silence was armor. The carriage lurched violently as the wheels hit uneven stone. She gripped the edge of her seat, steadying herself as they began the final climb. Through the swirling snow, massive iron gates emerged, black as midnight, crowned with wolf skulls and twisted metal that looked like frozen claws reaching toward the sky. Bloodridge Keep. Even the name tasted like violence. The gates groaned open and the carriage rolled into a courtyard carved from mountain stone. Warriors lined the walls, dozens of them, maybe 100, all watching with eyes that burned through the storm. Tall, broad-shouldered, dangerous, the Alpha King's pack. But something was wrong. Lyanna's Omega instincts prickled as she stepped down from the carriage. The air tasted wrong. Metallic. Bitter. She scanned the warriors' faces and saw it immediately. Exhaustion etched into every expression. Hollowed cheeks. Darkened eyes. Skin too pale beneath the snow's harsh light. These weren't healthy warriors. These were men barely standing. "Endikoid! Now!" A sharp voice cut through the wind. A woman emerged from the shadows, tall, silver-haired, wrapped in furs that looked like they'd been skinned from wolves twice her size. Her eyes were cold and calculating, the kind that measured worth in seconds. "I'm Vera," the woman said flatly. "Head of the household. You'll do exactly as I say when I say it. Understood?" Lyanna nodded. "Good. The Alpha King is not here to greet you. He's occupied." Vera's mouth twisted into something between a grimace and a sneer. "Don't take it personally. He didn't want you here in the first place." The words landed like stones, but Lyanna kept her face smooth. She'd expected this. "Follow me." They entered the keep through massive oak doors reinforced with iron. Inside, the corridors were dimly lit by torches that flickered against stone walls carved with ancient pack symbols. Wolves mid-hunt, moons in various phases, battles frozen in relief. The air smelled of smoke, sweat, and something else. Something sour and rotting that made Lyanna's stomach turn. Sickness. She could feel it now, pressing against her senses like a physical weight. It wasn't just exhaustion she'd seen in those warriors. It was something deeper, something spreading. "Your chambers," Vera announced, stopping before a heavy wooden door. She pushed it open without ceremony. "Dinner is at sundown. You'll be presented to the pack then. Don't embarrass yourself." The door slammed shut before Lyanna could respond. She stood alone in a stone chamber lit by a single fireplace. The room was sparse. A bed, a wardrobe, a basin of water that had already begun to freeze over. No decorations, no warmth. A cell with a mattress. Lyanna moved to the narrow window and looked out over the courtyard below. Warriors moved like shadows, slow and unsteady. One stumbled. Another caught him before he fell. They exchanged no words, just a grim acknowledgement that this was normal now. How long has this been happening? She pressed her fingers against the cold glass, her mind already working. This wasn't just fatigue from a hard winter. This was systematic, progressive. Something was destroying these people from the inside out. A knock at the door broke her focus. "Enter," she called. A young woman slipped inside, barely 20, with auburn hair tied back and eyes that darted nervously toward the hallway before the door closed. She carried a tray of bread and dried meat. "I'm Mira," the girl whispered. "I brought food. You must be starving." "Thank you." Liana gestured toward the small table. "You don't have to whisper. We're alone." Mira set the tray down but didn't leave. Instead, she lingered, wringing her hands. "You shouldn't have come here." Liana tilted her head. "I didn't have a choice." "None of us do," Mira's voice cracked. "But you're an Omega. You're not built for this place. The cold, the sickness, the—" She stopped herself, eyes widening. "I shouldn't say more." "What sickness?" Liana asked gently. Mira glanced toward the door again, her fear palpable. "It started 6 months ago. First it was just 1 or 2 warriors feeling weak. Then more. Now half the pack can barely lift a sword. Healers can't figure it out. Herbs don't work. Rest doesn't help. People are just fading." Liana's pulse quickened. "Have they tested the water? The food?" "Everything." Mira shook her head. "The Alpha King brought in healers from 3 territories. None of them found anything. It's like the mountain itself is cursed." "Or poisoned," Liana murmured. Mira's head snapped up. "What?" "Nothing." Liana forced a small smile. "Thank you for the food, Mira, and for the warning." The girl hesitated, then nodded and slipped back out into the corridor. Liana stood in the silence, her mind racing. Poison. It made sense. Progressive weakness, no clear source, resistance to traditional healing, all symptoms of long-term exposure to something toxic. But what? And how? She moved to the basin, dipping her fingers into the icy water. She closed her eyes and let her senses open. Something she'd hidden her entire life. Something her mother had warned her never to reveal. The gift. It wasn't magic. It was deeper than that. Older. A rare Omega ability passed down through bloodlines so ancient most had forgotten it ever existed. The ability to sense the body's natural flow, the currents of energy, blood, breath, and balance that kept a person alive. And more importantly, the ability to restore that flow when it broke. Her fingers tingled as she let her awareness spread through the water. Clean. No contamination here. But downstairs, in the courtyard, in the halls, something was wrong. She could feel it like a discordant note in a song. A disruption. A slow, creeping poison working its way through the pack. A sudden boom echoed through the keep, heavy footsteps in the corridor, followed by raised voices. "He's back," someone shouted. "The Alpha King's returned." Liana pulled her hand from the water and moved to the door, cracking it open just enough to see. Warriors flooded the hallway, their movements urgent despite their obvious exhaustion. At the center of the chaos walked a man who made the air itself seem to bend around him. Alpha King Draven Kael, tall, easily 6.5 feet, with shoulders broad enough to carry the weight of a dying pack. His hair was black as midnight, tied back roughly, and his face was all hard angles and barely contained fury. Scars marked his jawline and neck, old battle wounds worn like medals. But it was his eyes that struck her most, ice blue and utterly merciless. He moved through the corridor like a storm given human form, barking orders, his voice a deep rumble that cut through every other sound. "Status report, now." "Another 3 warriors down this morning, my king," a grizzled beta reported. "Healer says they're stable, but stable means nothing if they can't fight." Draven's voice was cold, controlled. "Double the rations for anyone still standing. I want perimeter patrols increased. If we show weakness now, the southern packs will strike." "My king, with respect, our warriors can barely—" "Then they'll push harder." Draven stopped, turning to face the beta directly. His eyes blazed. "We don't bow. We don't break. Understood?" "Yes, Alpha." Draven's gaze swept the corridor and landed directly on Liana's partially open door. Their eyes met. For a single frozen moment, the world went silent. She felt the full weight of his presence crash into her like a physical force. His alpha aura was suffocating, dominant, absolute. Most Omegas would have cowered, submitted, looked away. Liana held his gaze. Something flickered in those ice-blue eyes. Surprise, maybe. Or irritation. Then it was gone, replaced by cold indifference. He turned away without a word and continued down the hall, his warriors parting like water before him. Liana slowly closed the door, her heart pounding. So that was her husband-to-be, a king built from stone and fury, leading a dying pack through sheer force of will, a man who would never ask for help, never admit weakness, never see her as anything more than a political burden. Good. She didn't need his approval, she needed access. And tonight, at dinner, she'd get it. Walsa. The great hall was a cathedral of stone and firelight. Long tables stretched across the floor, filled with warriors who looked like ghosts of their former selves. The food was plentiful, roasted meat, bread, root vegetables, but most plates remained half full. Appetites had died along with strength. Liana entered alone, guided by Vera's sharp instructions to sit at the head table. All eyes turned toward her. Judgment, curiosity, resentment, the Southern Omega, the treaty bride, the outsider. She walked with her head high, her footsteps steady, and took her seat beside an empty chair clearly meant for the Alpha King. Across the table sat his inner circle, senior warriors, the head healer, and Vera, whose expression remained glacially neutral. Quite the entrance, Vera remarked dryly, though I suppose you're used to being watched. Not particularly, Liana replied calmly, but I'm used to being underestimated. A few warriors exchanged glances. Somewhere down the table, someone snorted, half laugh, half disbelief. The massive doors at the far end of the hall slammed open. Draven entered, and every voice in the room died instantly. He moved through the hall like a force of nature, his presence so commanding that warriors instinctively straightened despite their exhaustion. He reached the head table and dropped into his chair without looking at Liana. "Eat," he commanded the room. "You'll need your strength." Conversations resumed, muted and cautious. Liana watched as Draven carved into his meat with efficient, aggressive movements. He didn't acknowledge her, didn't even glance in her direction. She waited 5 minutes, then spoke. "Your warriors are dying." Every conversation within earshot stopped. Draven's knife paused mid-cut. Slowly, he turned his head toward her, his expression unreadable. "Observant," he said coldly. "Did they teach you that in the South, or is it a natural talent?" "They taught me to recognize patterns," Liana replied evenly. "And the pattern here is clear. Progressive weakness, no external wounds, resistance to traditional healing. This isn't a plague. It's poisoning." The head healer, a gray-bearded man named Osric, leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. "We've tested everything, girl. Water, food, soil, nothing." "Then you tested wrong," Liana said simply. A ripple of shock moved through the table. "You didn't challenge pack healers, especially not as an outsider, especially not as an Omega." Draven set down his knife with deliberate slowness. "You've been here less than a day, and you think you understand my pack better than the healers who've served it for decades?" "I think," Liana said, meeting his ice-blue gaze without flinching, "that sometimes an outsider sees what familiarity hides." Bold words. His voice dropped to something dangerous. "Can you back them up?" "Let me into your healer's wing," Liana said. "Give me one night with your sickest warriors. If I'm wrong, I'll apologize publicly and never speak of it again. And if you're right, then you'll have answers, and your warriors will live." The silence stretched like a blade against skin. Every eye in the hall was locked on them now. This clash between the untouchable Alpha King and the Omega bride who refused to bow. Finally, Draven leaned back in his chair. "One night, but if you fail, if you make things worse, you'll answer to me personally." It wasn't a threat. It was a promise. "Agreed," Liana said. Vera's eyes widened. Osric looked like he'd swallowed glass. But Draven simply returned to his meal, the matter settled. Liana forced herself to eat, though her appetite had vanished. She'd just made a gamble that could either save these people or prove her cousin right. Maybe she really was just a sacrificial lamb. But lambs, she'd learned, could have teeth when the shepherd wasn't looking. The healer's wing smelled of herbs, sweat, and desperation. Lyanna entered just after midnight, escorted by two stone-faced warriors who clearly thought this was a waste of time. Osric waited inside, arms crossed, his expression somewhere between skepticism and outright hostility. "The Alpha King's orders," he said stiffly. "You have until dawn. Touch nothing without my permission. If anyone worsens, I'm stopping this immediately." "Understood." Lyanna moved past him, her eyes scanning the rows of beds. 12 warriors lay in various states of collapse. Some were unconscious. Others stared at the ceiling with hollow eyes, too weak to sit up. The strongest among them could barely lift a hand. She approached the nearest bed. A young warrior, maybe 25, his skin gray and clammy. His breathing was shallow, labored. "What's his name?" she asked quietly. "Garen," Osric replied. "He was one of our best scouts. Now he can't walk 10 steps without collapsing." Lyanna knelt beside the bed and placed her hand gently on Garen's wrist. She closed her eyes and listened. The gift opened like a door inside her mind, a rush of sensation as her awareness spread through Garen's body. She felt his heartbeat, erratic and weak, felt his lungs struggling to draw breath, felt his blood moving sluggishly through veins that should have been strong and clear. And there, she felt it. A foreign presence, tiny particles clinging to his blood cells, disrupting the natural flow of oxygen and energy. Metallic, toxic, slow-acting but relentless. Poison. Her mother's voice echoed in her memory. "The gift is not magic, Lyanna. It's balance. You cannot create. You can only restore what was already there." She focused, drawing on that deep, ancient instinct. Her hand grew warm as she guided her awareness through Garen's system, identifying every particle of the poison and gently, carefully, coaxing his body to expel it, to remember what health felt like, to restore the natural flow. Minutes passed. Then, Garen's eyes snapped open. He gasped, his chest heaving as color flooded back into his face. He sat up so suddenly that Osric stumbled backward. What happened?" Garen's voice was hoarse but strong. I feel good." The room went dead silent. Osric stared. The warriors at the door stared. And Lyanna, exhausted but steady, simply moved to the next bed. "Who's next?" she asked quietly. By the time dawnlight crept through the narrow windows, 7 warriors were sitting up. 3 more were sleeping peacefully, their breathing deep and steady for the first time in months. 2 remained unconscious but stable, their bodies too damaged to recover in a single night. Lyanna stood in the center of the room, swaying slightly from exhaustion. Her hands trembled, her head pounded. Using the gift always took a toll, and she'd just pushed herself harder than ever before. But 12 dying warriors now had a chance. Osric approached her slowly, his face pale with shock. How did you—" "It doesn't matter how," Lyanna said softly. "What matters is that it worked. And now you know, this is poison. You need to find the source before more warriors are infected." "I'll inform the Alpha King immediately." Osric's voice shook. You saved them." Lyanna didn't respond. She was too tired, too drained. As the warriors began to whisper among themselves, shock giving way to hope, she slipped out of the healer's wing and made her way back through the silent corridors. She didn't see the figure watching from the shadows. Draven stood in the darkness, his ice-blue eyes fixed on the Omega Bride who'd just done the impossible. He'd come to witness her failure, to confirm that she was nothing more than a desperate Southern girl playing at being useful. Instead, he'd watched her bring dying warriors back from the edge, without herbs, without magic, with nothing but her hands and a strength he didn't understand. "Who are you?" he murmured into the empty hall. But Lyanna was already gone, disappearing around a corner like a ghost, and for the first time in 6 months, Draven Kale felt something he'd forgotten how to feel. Hope. Word spread through Bloodridge Keep like wildfire through dry timber. By sunrise, every warrior in the compound knew. The Southern Omega, the unwanted bride, the political sacrifice, had walked into the healer's wing and brought dying men back from the edge. 7 warriors who couldn't stand yesterday were now walking the corridors. 3 more slept peacefully for the first time in months. The impossible had happened, and the pack didn't know whether to worship her or fear her. Liana woke to shouting outside her chamber door. She sat up slowly, her body aching like she'd been thrown down a mountain. Every muscle screamed. Her head throbbed with a dull, persistent pain that made the morning light feel like daggers. Using the gift always extracted a price, but last night she'd pushed further than ever before. Her hand still trembled when she tried to make a fist. The shouting grew louder. "Don't care what she did. She's an outsider. She saved Garen's life, you ungrateful bastard." Or she cursed him. "We don't know what she is." Liana moved to the door and pressed her ear against the wood. At least a dozen voices argued in the corridor, warriors by the sound of it, half defending her, half calling for her to be locked up or sent back south before she infected anyone else. A sharp bang silenced them all. "Enough." Draven's voice cut through the chaos like a blade. "Anyone who has a problem with what happened last night can take it up with me personally. In the training yard. With steel." The silence that followed was absolute. "That's what I thought," Draven continued coldly. "The Omega stays. She works. And anyone who interferes answers to me. Now get back to your posts before I decide we need fewer mouths to feed." Footsteps scattered in every direction. Liana stepped back from the door, her heart pounding. Draven had just defended her. Not because he trusted her, she could hear it in his voice, but because she was useful. A tool. A weapon he could point at his pack's mysterious illness. The door opened without warning. Draven stood in the threshold, still wearing his training leathers, sweat dampening his collar despite the freezing temperature. His ice-blue eyes swept over her with clinical efficiency, taking in her exhausted state in seconds. "You look like death," he said flatly. "Good morning to you too," Liana replied, forcing herself to stand straight despite the way her legs wanted to buckle. He stepped inside and closed the door behind him. The room suddenly felt half its size. His presence was overwhelming, not just physical, though he towered over her, but something deeper. His alpha aura filled every corner, pressing against her Omega instincts like a hand around her throat. Most Omegas would have submitted immediately, bowed their heads, shown their necks. Liana met his gaze and waited. Something flickered in his expression. Surprise again. Then something harder. "What you did last night saved your warriors," she interrupted. "Was either a miracle or the most dangerous con I've ever seen." His voice dropped to something lethal. "Which is it?" "Does it matter?" Liana asked. "They're alive. Isn't that what you wanted?" "What I want," Draven said, stepping closer, "is to know what you are. Healers can't do what you did, not without herbs, rituals, or weeks of treatment. You walked in, touched them, and they recovered. That's not healing. That's something else." "It's a gift," Liana said simply. "A rare one, passed down through old bloodlines. I can sense the body's natural flow and restore it when it's broken. That's all." "That's all?" His laugh was bitter. "You make it sound simple." "It's not." She held up her trembling hands. "Every time I use it, it costs me. Last night I pushed too hard. If I'd tried to heal one more person, I would have collapsed." Draven's eyes narrowed. "Then you're reckless." "I'm effective." She lowered her hands. "Your warriors are walking. Your healer now knows this is poison, not plague. You're welcome." For a long moment, they stood in tense silence. Then Draven's mouth curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. "You have spine. I'll give you that. Is that a compliment or a threat?" "Both." He turned toward the door, then paused. "Osric wants to see you. He's been testing the water sources since dawn. If you're right about the poison, we need to find it before more warriors are infected." "And if I'm wrong?" Draven glanced back over his shoulder. "Then you'll have bigger problems than my temper." He left without another word. Liana sank onto the edge of her bed, exhaling slowly. Her hands were still shaking, not from fear, though Draven was terrifying in his own right, but from exhaustion. She'd bought herself time, proven her worth. But now the real work began, finding the source of the poison before it killed anyone else. The keep's water system was a marvel of ancient engineering. Deep wells drilled into the mountain itself, fed by underground springs that had run clear and cold for centuries. Stone channels carried water throughout the compound, to the kitchens, the healer's wing, the training yards, the living quarters. It was a closed system, protected from outside contamination. Or it should have been. Lyanna followed Osric through the underground tunnels, her boots splashing through shallow streams as torchlight danced across wet stone walls. The air was frigid and damp, heavy with the smell of minerals and earth. "We've tested every well," Osric explained, his voice echoing in the confined space. "Every channel, every storage tank. The water is clean." "Then the poison isn't in the water itself," Lyanna said, studying the channels as they walked. "It's being introduced somewhere downstream, after the water leaves the wells but before it reaches the warriors." "That's impossible. These tunnels are sealed. No one comes down here except maintenance crews, and they're all trusted veterans." "Trusted doesn't mean innocent." Lyanna stopped beside a junction where 3 channels merged into one. She knelt and dipped her fingers into the flowing water, closing her eyes. Clean. Just like Osric said. But something nagged at her. A feeling. An instinct. "Where does this channel lead?" she asked, pointing to the rightmost tunnel. "Training yard. The warriors use it for washing after drills." "And this one?" "Kitchens." "And this?" She pointed to the smallest channel, barely a trickle compared to the others. Osric frowned. "Living quarters. Officer's wing mostly. Why?" Lyanna stood slowly, her mind working. "Show me the officer's wing. Now." "Lady Lyanna, I really don't think—" "Now, Osric." The authority in her voice surprised even her, but Osric nodded and led her deeper into the tunnels, toward a section that branched off into narrower passages. The air here was colder, stiller, less frequently traveled. They emerged into a small stone chamber where water flowed into a carved basin before continuing through channels to the rooms above. Lyanna approached the basin carefully, her senses already screaming warning. She touched the water and immediately jerked her hand back. "What is it?" Osric demanded. "This." Lyanna held up her fingers. Even in the torchlight, she could see the faint discoloration, a greenish tint, almost invisible unless you knew to look for it. "The poison is here, in this basin. Someone's been adding it to the officer's water supply." Osric's face went white. That's insane. Who would—" "Someone who wants your strongest warriors dead." Lyanna's voice was grim. "Officers drink from this supply. They're the backbone of your pack. Take them out slowly, quietly, and the entire command structure collapses." "But that means—" Osric's horror deepened. "That means it's one of us, someone inside the keep." A voice spoke from the darkness behind them. "Smart Omega." They spun around. A figure stepped into the torchlight. A warrior Lyanna didn't recognize, middle-aged with a scar bisecting his left eyebrow. He held a sword casually at his side, but his eyes were cold and calculating. "Rylan?" Osric's voice cracked. "What are you doing down here?" "Making sure loose ends don't unravel." Rylan's smile was thin and ugly. "You should have stayed in your pretty chambers, Southern girl. Should have played the obedient bride. But you had to go digging." Lyanna's pulse spiked, but she kept her voice steady. "You're the traitor. You've been poisoning the officers." "For 6 months now." Rylan sounded almost proud. "Slow enough that no one noticed, methodical enough that it looked like illness. Your precious Alpha King never suspected a thing." "Why?" Osric demanded, his voice shaking with rage. "These are your brothers, your pack." "My pack?" Rylan laughed bitterly. "This pack threw my father into exile for challenging Draven's rule. Stripped our family of rank, left us with nothing. I've been waiting years for the chance to watch it all burn." "So you allied with the Southern Kingdoms," Lyanna said quietly, pieces clicking into place. "They sent me here as a bride to seal the treaty, but someone in my homeland wanted this pack destroyed from the inside." "You're their agent." Rylan's smile widened. "Clever and pretty. Shame you won't live to tell anyone." He moved with warrior speed, closing the distance in 2 strides, sword rising for a killing blow. Lyanna threw herself sideways, hitting the whetstone hard. Pain exploded through her shoulder, but she rolled and scrambled to her feet. Osric shouted something, but Rylan's blade was already swinging toward her again. She couldn't fight him, had no weapon, no training, but she had the gift. As Rylan lunged, Liana did something desperate. She reached out, not with her hands, but with her awareness, and pushed. She felt Rylan's heartbeat, rapid and strong, felt the blood pumping through his veins, and she disrupted it. Just for a second, just enough. Rylan stumbled, his eyes widening in shock as his legs buckled. He crashed to his knees, gasping, "What? What did you... Run!" Liana grabbed Osric's arm and pulled him toward the tunnel entrance. Behind them, Rylan roared in fury, already recovering. Footsteps pounded after them. They sprinted through the tunnels, torchlight bouncing wildly off wet walls. Liana's lungs burned. Her legs screamed. She could hear Rylan gaining on them, younger, stronger, faster. They burst into the main corridor just as a patrol of warriors rounded the corner. "Traitor!" Osric screamed. "Rylan's the traitor! He's been poisoning the water!" The warriors' confusion lasted only a heartbeat. Then Rylan emerged from the tunnel behind them, sword still in hand, and everything became crystal clear. "Seize him!" the patrol leader bellowed. Rylan didn't run. Instead, he turned and bolted back into the tunnels, disappearing into the darkness before anyone could react. "After him!" The patrol leader led his warriors into pursuit, their shouts echoing through the underground. Liana sagged against the wall, her entire body shaking. Osric caught her before she collapsed. "You saved us," he breathed. "How did you—" Later, Liana forced herself upright. "We need to tell the Alpha King, now." Draven's fury was a living thing. He stood in the council chamber, a circular room carved from black stone, lit by a massive fire pit in the center, and listened to Osric's report with an expression so cold it could have frozen the flames solid. "Rylan," he said finally, his voice deadly quiet. "One of my senior warriors, a man I've fought beside for a decade." He confessed everything, Osric confirmed. Southern agents paid him to poison the officer's water supply. His goal was to cripple our command structure before winter ended. And now he's fled into the mountain tunnels. Draven's hands clenched into fists. "Like the coward he is." "My king," Vera spoke from her position near the door. "We should seal the tunnels, trap him inside." "No." Draven's eyes blazed. "I want him found, alive. He's going to tell me exactly who in the south paid him, and then I'm going to make an example of him that every kingdom from here to the coast will remember." His gaze shifted to Liana, who stood quietly near the fire. "You found the poison source. You identified the traitor. You nearly got yourself killed in the process." "I did what needed to be done," she said simply. "Reckless," Draven muttered. But there was something in his eyes now, not quite respect, but close. Recognition, maybe. "If Rylan had been faster, you'd be dead. But I'm not. This time." He moved closer, his presence overwhelming as always. "You understand what this means, don't you? Someone in your homeland orchestrated this, sent you here as a bride while simultaneously trying to destroy my pack from within. Your people tried to kill mine." The accusation hung in the air like smoke. Liana met his gaze without flinching. "I had no knowledge of this plot. I was sent here as a treaty offering, nothing more. But if my kingdom is behind this," her voice hardened, "then they used me, made me an accomplice without my knowledge, and I will help you find the truth." Draven studied her for a long moment. Then he turned to his assembled warriors. "Double the guard on all entry points. I want search parties in those tunnels within the hour. And someone send word to the southern border outposts. If Rylan tries to flee back to Vir, I want him intercepted." "Yes, my king," came the unified response. As the council dispersed, Draven gestured for Liana to follow him. They walked in tense silence through the corridors until they reached a balcony overlooking the training yard. Below, warriors practiced with renewed energy, the ones Liana had healed now moving with strength they hadn't possessed in months. "Look at them," Draven said quietly. "For half a year I watched my pack waste away. Watched warriors I've known since childhood lose the ability to hold a sword. And I couldn't stop it, couldn't fix it, couldn't even identify what was wrong." He turned to face her. "Then you arrived, spent one night in the healer's wing, and did what an entire team of experts couldn't do in 6 months. You found the source, exposed the traitor, saved lives." "You're welcome," Liana said softly. Don't misunderstand. His voice was still cold. I don't trust you. Your kingdom tried to destroy mine from the inside. For all I know, you're playing a deeper game. I'm not. Prove it. His ice blue eyes burned into hers. Help me hunt down Rylan. Use that gift of yours to track him through the tunnels. Show me that your loyalty is to this pack, not the kingdom that sent you here to die. Lyanna's breath caught. He was testing her, pushing her, daring her to choose a side. If I do this, she said carefully, and we catch him, what happens to me? To the treaty? That depends on what we find. Draven's expression was unreadable. If your kingdom is responsible, the treaty is void, which means you have no protection here, no status. You'd be an enemy asset. Or, Lyanna countered, I could be the reason you have any answers at all, the reason your warriors are alive, the reason you found the traitor before he finished what he started. Draven's mouth curved into something that might have been respect. You don't back down, do you? Would you prefer I did? No. He turned back toward the training yard. Cowards bore me. And whatever you are, you're not a coward. Before Lyanna could respond, a warrior burst onto the balcony, breathing hard. My king! We found something in the tunnels. You need to see this. Look, the cache was hidden in a forgotten storage chamber deep beneath the keep, crates stacked against the walls. Dozens of them. When Draven pried one open, Lyanna's heart sank. Vials. Hundreds of them, filled with the same greenish liquid she'd found in the water basin. Enough poison to kill every warrior in the compound 3 times over, Draven said, his voice like gravel. This wasn't just about weakening us. This was extermination. Beside the crates sat something worse, sealed letters bearing the royal crest of Vyre. Draven tore one open and read in silence. His expression darkened with every line. When he finished, he looked at Lyanna with something between pity and rage. Your cousin, he said flatly, Lord Matthias Viere. He's the architect. These letters detail the entire plan, send you north as a distraction while Rylan poisoned the pack. When we were weak enough, Vyre's armies would sweep in and claim the mountain territories. Lyanna felt the floor drop out from under her. Matthias. Her voice was barely a whisper. He's the one who pushed for this marriage, who insisted I be sent immediately. Because you were never meant to be a bride. Draven's words cut like knives. You were meant to be a scapegoat. When we discovered the plot, we'd blame you, execute you, and Vyre would have justification to declare war anyway. The cruelty of it stole her breath. Her own family had sent her here to die, not just as a political pawn, but as a weapon, a tool to destroy the very pack she'd been married into. I didn't know, she whispered. I swear I didn't. I believe you. Draven's voice was softer now, tired. You're too useful to be part of this scheme. If you were a conspirator, you'd have let my warriors die. Let the poison finish its work. Instead, you exposed everything. He dropped the letter and turned to his warriors. Seal these chambers. I want every vial cataloged and destroyed. And send a message to the southern border. Tell them Draven Kale knows what Vyre attempted, and war is coming. My king, Vera interjected carefully, if we declare war now, we're still weak. Half our warriors are barely recovered. We don't have the strength for a prolonged campaign. Then we'll build it, Draven's voice was absolute. But Vyre will answer for this, one way or another. Lyanna stepped forward, her heart pounding. Let me help. Every eye turned toward her. I can keep healing your warriors, she continued, forcing strength into her voice. Get them back to full strength faster than any healer could. I can identify anyone else who might be compromised. And she swallowed hard. I know Vyre's court, their strategies, their weaknesses. I was invisible there my entire life, but that meant I listened. I know things that could help you. Draven studied her with those merciless ice blue eyes. Why? Why would you help destroy your own kingdom? Because it's not my kingdom anymore. Lyanna's voice shook with suppressed fury. They sent me here to die. Used me as a pawn in a game I never knew I was playing. Matthias, my own blood, condemned me without a second thought. She met Draven's gaze. This pack gave me a chance. Vire gave me nothing. So yes, I'll help you burn it down. Silence stretched through the chamber. Then Draven extended his hand. Welcome to the war, Omega. Lyanna gripped his hand. His skin was warm despite the cold, his grip firm and steady. It wasn't acceptance, wasn't trust, but it was a beginning. As they stood in that underground chamber surrounded by poison meant to kill them all, Lyanna made a silent vow. She would prove her loyalty, heal every warrior, hunt down every traitor. And when the war came, because it would come, she would stand beside this brutal, uncompromising Alpha King and show her homeland exactly what they'd thrown away. Above them, in the darkened tunnels, Rylan crept through the shadows toward a hidden exit. He'd failed. The Omega had ruined everything, but he still had one final card to play, one message to send south before the trap closed completely. The bride knows. Kill her before she destroys everything. Rylan pressed himself against the cold tunnel wall, waiting for the patrol to pass. 3 warriors moved through the darkness ahead, torchlight bouncing off wet stone as they searched for him. He counted their footsteps, measured their breathing patterns, calculated the exact moment when their backs would be turned. 20 years of training hadn't abandoned him just because he'd become a traitor. The warriors rounded a corner. Rylan moved. He slipped through a narrow crevice he'd discovered months ago, a natural crack in the mountain that led to an older section of tunnels, abandoned decades before. The pack didn't even know it existed. He'd used it to smuggle in the poisoned shipments, to meet with Vire's agents under cover of darkness, to plan every detail of the slow destruction he'd orchestrated. Now it was his escape route. He emerged into a wider chamber where water dripped from stalactites overhead. In the center sat a sealed pack, emergency supplies he'd stashed weeks ago in case everything fell apart. Food, water, warm clothes, a map showing the fastest route through the mountain passes to the southern border, and one final message stone, enchanted to carry words across vast distances. Rylan knelt and pressed his palm against the smooth surface. The stone warmed beneath his touch, ancient magic responding to his intent. He spoke quickly, urgency making his words clipped and harsh. The bride knows. Lyanna Vire exposed the poison source and identified me. Draven has the cache. He knows everything. Rylan's voice hardened. Kill her before she destroys the entire operation. Send assassins, now! The stone pulsed once, message received, then went cold and dark. Rylan grabbed his pack and disappeared into the deeper tunnels, leaving Bloodridge Keep behind forever. Let Draven hunt. Let the pack rage. By the time they found this chamber, he'd be halfway to Vire territory, and the southern kingdoms would already be moving against the Omega who'd ruined everything. She wouldn't survive the week. Lyanna woke to Mira shaking her shoulder, the girl's face pale with terror. Lady Lyanna, you need to wake up, please! She sat up immediately, exhaustion still clinging to her bones despite hours of sleep. What's wrong? The Alpha King wants you in the healer's wing. More warriors collapsed during the night. Mira's hands twisted in her apron. They're saying the poison is still in the water, that we didn't find all the sources, that it's getting worse. Lyanna's blood went cold. How many? 6, maybe 7. Mira's voice cracked. One of them is Garen. The name hit like a physical blow. Garen, the first warrior she'd healed, the one who'd sat up with color in his cheeks and hope in his eyes. If he'd relapsed, if the poison was still spreading despite everything they'd done, she threw off her blankets and dressed in seconds, not bothering with anything except basic functionality. Mira led her through corridors already buzzing with fear and anger. Warriors watched her pass with expressions ranging from desperate hope to open hostility. She's the reason this is happening, someone muttered as she passed. Southern Witch brought the plague with her. Should have never let her touch our people. Lyanna ignored them all and pushed through the healer's wing doors. The scene inside was chaos. Osric and 2 assistant healers moved between beds where warriors lay in various states of collapse. But these weren't the slow, progressive symptoms from before. These were violent, convulsions, vomiting, skin flushed with fever. This was acute poisoning, not the chronic exposure they'd been fighting. Draven stood near the far wall, his expression carved from ice. When he saw Lyanna, he strode toward her with barely contained fury. Explain this, he demanded. You said you found the source. You said the poison was in the officer's basin. It was. Liana moved past him toward the nearest bed. Garen lay there, his body shaking, sweat soaking through his shirt. She placed her hand on his wrist and closed her eyes, letting her awareness spread through his system, and immediately recoiled. This is different, she said, her voice sharp with alarm. This isn't the same poison from the basin. This is something new, faster acting, more lethal. How many sources are there? Draven's voice was deadly quiet. I don't know. Liana moved to the next bed, repeating the process. Same result. Different poison, introduced recently. But whoever did this wanted to make sure we knew. This is too obvious, too violent. It's a message. What message? That we haven't won. She turned to face him. Rilin wasn't working alone. There's another agent in the keep, and they just escalated. Vera appeared in the doorway, her expression grim. My king. The morning meal is what triggered it. All the affected warriors ate from the same kitchen supply. Seal the kitchens, Draven ordered immediately. No one eats anything that hasn't been personally tested, and I want every member of the kitchen staff questioned, now. As Vera disappeared to execute his orders, Liana moved between beds with increasing urgency. The poison was spreading faster than she could work. She could heal one warrior, maybe two, but there were 7 here and more might be affected. If she pushed herself too hard again, do what you can, Draven said, reading her hesitation. Save who you can save. She met his eyes and saw something unexpected there. Not anger, not blame, just grim acceptance that they were fighting an enemy who wouldn't stop until the entire pack was destroyed. Liana placed her hands on Garen's chest and let the gift flow. 4 hours later, she'd saved 5 warriors. 2 were beyond her reach. The poison had damaged their systems too severely, spread too far before she could intervene. Osric covered their faces with white cloth while Liana stood against the wall, trembling with exhaustion and grief. She'd failed. Not completely, but enough. 2 lives lost because she hadn't been fast enough, hadn't understood the threat quickly enough. It's not your fault, Osric said quietly, approaching her. You did everything possible. It wasn't enough. Her voice was hollow. It never feels like enough. He placed a weathered hand on her shoulder. But 5 warriors are alive because of you. That matters. Before she could respond, shouting erupted from the corridor outside. Not the usual pack banter or training yard aggression. This was genuine alarm. Draven was already moving, his hand on his sword as he threw open the door. A scout stumbled inside, blood streaming from a gash on his forehead. My king, he gasped. The southern border, Vyre's forces, they're mobilizing. The room went silent. How many? Draven demanded. At least 2,000. Heavy infantry, cavalry, siege equipment. The scout swayed and another warrior caught him. They're not hiding it. They want us to know they're coming. How long until they reach our territory? 3 days. Maybe 4 if the mountain passes slow them down. Draven's expression didn't change, but Liana saw his jaw tighten. 2,000 soldiers against a pack that was still recovering, still weak, still reeling from internal sabotage. It wasn't a battle. It was an execution. Assemble the council, Draven ordered, and someone get this man to a healer. As warriors scattered to obey, Draven turned to Liana. You said you know Vyre's strategies, their weaknesses. Prove it. Because if you can't help me find a way to survive the next 4 days, none of us will live long enough to see spring. The War Council met in the Great Hall as snow began to fall outside. Maps covered the massive oak table, detailed renderings of the mountain passes, the border territories, the approaches to Bloodridge Keep. Red markers indicated Vyre's reported positions. Blue showed the pack's defensive posts, pitifully sparse compared to the Southern Army's numbers. Liana stood beside Draven, surrounded by his senior warriors. Vera, Osric, the patrol captains, the weapons master, all of them watching her with varying degrees of suspicion and desperate hope. Speak, Draven said simply. Liana took a breath and stepped forward. Vire's army looks overwhelming, but it has a critical weakness, supply lines. They're marching through hostile territory in winter. Every day they're in the mountains, they burn through resources they can't easily replace. Food, firewood, medicine. So we wait them out? The weapons master scoffed. Let them freeze while we starve in here? No, Liana pointed to the map. We cut their supply lines. Vire's commanders are arrogant. They'll assume you're too weak to mount offensive strikes. They'll focus on the siege and leave their rear vulnerable. Send small teams, your best hunters, people who know these mountains, to harass their supply wagons. Burn their food stores. Poison their water the same way they poisoned yours. A few warriors exchanged glances. It was ruthless, effective, and exactly the kind of asymmetric warfare that could level the playing field. What else? Draven asked. Matthias is leading this army personally. Liana's voice hardened. My cousin. He's ambitious, vicious, and desperate to prove himself to the king, but he's also reckless. He'll want a quick victory, something dramatic he can parade back home. That makes him predictable. How so? He'll try to draw you into open battle, challenge you directly, make it personal. She met Draven's gaze. He'll use me as bait. The room went cold. Explain, Draven said quietly. I'm the treaty bride, the political symbol. If Matthias can capture me, parade me as evidence that you failed to protect your own mate, it humiliates you in front of every pack in the north. It breaks morale, makes you look weak. Liana's hands clenched. He'll send assassins first. Try to take me alive. When that fails, he'll demand my return as a condition for peace talks. And you think I should give you to him? Draven's voice was flat, unreadable. No. Liana's eyes blazed. I think you should use me. Let him think I'm vulnerable. Set a trap. When his forces come for me, hit them with everything you have. The silence that followed was absolute. Every warrior in the room stared at her. This Omega, who just volunteered herself as bait in a war that could kill her a dozen different ways. Vera spoke first. That's suicide. It's strategy, Liana countered. Matthias wants me dead or captured. Either outcome serves his purposes. But if we control the circumstances, if we choose the ground and the timing, we can turn his obsession into a weapon against him. She's right, Draven said suddenly. All eyes turned to him. Vire's army is larger, better equipped, and fighting on familiar terrain once they clear the passes. We can't win a straight fight, but we can bleed them, exhaust them, force them into mistakes. He looked at Liana. And if they're focused on capturing you, they're not focused on our defenses. My king, Vera protested. If something goes wrong, if they actually succeed in taking her, they won't. Draven's voice was absolute. Because I'll be there. The declaration sent a ripple through the room, the Alpha King personally guarding the bait. It was unorthodox, dangerous, but it also sent a clear message. Liana wasn't disposable. She was pack. We have 3 days, Draven continued, his eyes sweeping the assembled warriors. I want supply raid teams ready to move by dawn. I want every defensive position reinforced, and I want intelligence on Vire's exact movements, troop numbers, equipment, command structure, everything. And the traitor? The weapons master asked. The one who poisoned this morning's meal? Still searching. Draven's expression darkened. But when we find them, they'll answer for those 2 dead warriors. Publicly. As the council dispersed to prepare, Liana remained at the table, studying the maps with burning eyes. Somewhere out there, Matthias was marching toward her with an army at his back. Her own blood, her own family, coming to kill her for daring to survive. She would show him what survival really meant. The assassins came that night. Liana woke to the whisper of steel against leather, a sound so soft most people would have missed it. But her Omega senses were sharper than normal, heightened by weeks of constant threat. She rolled out of bed silently, her heart hammering, and pressed herself against the wall beside the door. The lock clicked. Amateur work. These weren't professional killers. The door eased open and 2 figures slipped inside, both dressed in dark clothes, faces covered, blades gleaming in the moonlight from her window. They moved toward her bed, raising their weapons for killing strikes. Liana acted. She grabbed the water basin from beside her and hurled it with all her strength. It struck the first assassin in the head with a wet crack. He stumbled, cursing. The second spun toward her, blade flashing. She dove under the swing, rolled across the floor, and screamed, "Assassins! Guards!" The second attacker lunged for her, but the chamber door exploded inward. Draven entered like a force of nature, moving faster than Lyanna thought possible for someone his size. His fist connected with the assassin's jaw with a bone-shattering crack. The man dropped instantly. The first assassin, still dazed from the basin, tried to run. Draven caught him by the throat and slammed him against the wall hard enough to crack stone. "Who sent you?" Draven's voice was death itself. The assassin gagged, clawing at Draven's grip. "Go to hell." "Wrong answer." Draven squeezed, and something in the man's throat made a wet, crunching sound. The assassin's eyes rolled back, unconscious but alive. More warriors poured into the room, securing both attackers. Draven released the unconscious man and turned to Lyanna, who stood pressed against the wall, breathing hard, her nightgown torn where she'd rolled across the floor. "You're injured," he said, his eyes catching on a cut along her forearm. She hadn't even noticed it. "I'm fine." Her voice shook despite her best efforts. "They were waiting for me to sleep." They were incompetent. Draven moved closer, examining the wound with surprising gentleness. "Professional assassins would have killed you before you woke. These were amateurs, probably local recruits paid to finish what Ryland started." "Which means there are more." Lyanna's eyes met his. "More traitors in the keep. More people waiting for the right moment." "Then we flush them out." Draven gestured to his warriors. "Take these two to the cells. I want them conscious and talking by morning. Use whatever methods necessary." "Yes, my king." As the assassins were dragged away, Draven turned back to Lyanna. "You're not sleeping here tonight." "Where?" "My chambers. Guarded. Secure." He cut off her protest before she could voice it. "This isn't negotiable. Until we've cleared every traitor from this keep, you're too vulnerable alone." Lyanna wanted to argue, wanted to insist she could protect herself. But the truth was undeniable. She'd gotten lucky tonight. If Draven hadn't been close enough to hear her scream, if the assassins had been even slightly more skilled, she'd be dead. "All right," she said quietly. Draven's chambers were at the highest point of the keep, accessible only through a guarded corridor and a single reinforced door. Inside, the space was surprisingly sparse. A massive bed, a desk covered in maps and reports, weapons mounted on the walls, and a fireplace that burned with steady warmth. "You'll sleep there." Draven pointed to the bed. "I'll take the chair." "That's ridiculous. This is your room, and you're my responsibility." His tone left no room for argument. "Sleep, Omega. We have a long day ahead." Lyanna climbed into the bed, still wearing her torn nightgown, and pulled the heavy furs over herself. The bed smelled like him, smoke and leather and something wild, like the mountain wind. It should have been unsettling. Instead, it was oddly comforting. She watched as Draven settled into a chair near the fire, his sword across his lap, his eyes fixed on the door with unwavering focus. Even relaxed, he radiated danger. A predator at rest but ready to explode into violence at the slightest provocation. "Why are you protecting me?" she asked into the darkness. "Because you're useful," he replied without looking at her. "That's not the only reason." Silence stretched between them. Then finally, Draven spoke. "You saved my warriors when I couldn't. You exposed the traitors poisoning my pack. You stood in front of my war council and offered yourself as bait to win a war we're losing." He turned his head, those ice-blue eyes catching firelight. "You've earned protection, that's all." But Lyanna heard what he didn't say. Somewhere in the past 3 days, she'd stopped being just a political obligation. She'd become something else. Not quite trusted, not quite pack, but no longer expendable. "Thank you," she whispered. Draven didn't respond, just turned back to watching the door, a silent sentinel between her and everything that wanted her dead. Lyanna closed her eyes and, despite everything, slept. Morning brought revelation and horror in equal measure. The captured assassins broke under interrogation just after dawn. Vera delivered the report to Draven's chambers personally, her face ashen. "They were kitchen staff," she said quietly, so only Draven and Lyanna could hear. "Working in the keep for years. Sleeper agents activated when Ryland's plot was exposed. Their orders came directly from Vire." "How many more?" Draven demanded. "They claim only 4 total. 2 are dead, the ones you captured last night. 2 remain unidentified." Vera's hands clenched. They were told to kill Lady Lyanna by any means necessary. Poison, blade, fire, whatever worked. And the army marching toward us? Real. Matthias is leading 2,000 soldiers through the northern pass. They'll reach our outer defenses by tomorrow at sunset. Draven stood abruptly, beginning to pace like a caged wolf. We're out of time. The supply raid teams need to move today. And we need those last 2 traitors identified before Vair's forces arrive. My king, Lyanna interjected. Let me help. Both Draven and Vera turned to stare at her. I can sense disruption in the body's natural flow, Lyanna continued. Illness, poison, but I can also sense deception. It manifests differently. Elevated heart rate, disrupted breathing patterns, chemical changes in the blood when someone's lying or afraid of being discovered. She stood, facing them both. Gather your household staff, everyone who has access to the keep's critical areas. Let me screen them. That's dozens of people, Vera protested. It would take hours. Then we start now. Lyanna's voice was firm. Because if those traitors poison the water supply or sabotage the defenses while we're fighting Vair's army, this keep falls, and everyone in it dies. Draven studied her with those calculating eyes. Then he nodded. Do it. Vera, assemble everyone in the Great Hall. Kitchen staff, cleaning crews, maintenance workers, guards, everyone. My king, some of these people have served this pack for decades, and 2 of them are traitors. Draven's voice cut like a blade. We find them today, or we lose everything tomorrow. Odd. The screening took 6 hours. One by one, members of the household staff stood before Lyanna while she placed her hands on their wrists and opened her senses. Most were clean, nervous because of the situation, angry at being suspected, but ultimately innocent. Their bodies told simple, honest stories. But 2 told different tales. The first was a young man who worked in the armory. The moment Lyanna touched his wrist, she felt it. His heart racing too fast, his breathing shallow and panicked, stress hormones flooding his system in waves. Not the normal nervousness of being questioned. This was terror of being discovered. Him, she said quietly. Warriors seized the young man immediately. He didn't deny it, just collapsed to his knees, sobbing. They have my sister, he wailed. Vair agents kidnapped her 6 months ago, said they'd kill her if I didn't help. I didn't want to. I never wanted to hurt anyone. Where is she? Draven demanded. I don't know. They never told me. Just said if I followed orders, they'd let her go when it was over. Lyanna felt a stab of pity despite everything. Another pawn, another person used and discarded by her homeland's ruthless games. Take him to the cells, Draven ordered. Find out everything he knows about Vair's plans, then decide what to do with him. The armory worker was dragged away, still sobbing. Lyanna continued screening. The second traitor was harder to identify, an older woman who'd worked in the keep's records room for 20 years. She was calm, controlled, her body showing only mild stress. But there was something off, something Lyanna couldn't quite name until she dug deeper, letting her awareness spread through the woman's system. Scar tissue. Chemical markers. Signs of severe torture, old but unmistakable. You? Lyanna said softly. They broke you, didn't they? Years ago. Made you a weapon and sent you north. The woman's calm mask slipped for just a heartbeat. Then she smiled, cold and empty. Clever girl, she said. Too clever. Should have let you die in your sleep. She moved with shocking speed for her age, producing a blade from somewhere in her robes and lunging straight at Lyanna. But Draven was faster. His hand caught the woman's wrist mid-strike, twisting until bones cracked and the blade clattered to the floor. How long? He asked, his voice deadly quiet. 18 years? The woman's smile didn't fade despite the obvious pain. Your father welcomed me with open arms. Never suspected. Never knew. And I've been feeding Vair intelligence ever since. Then you've seen what's coming, Draven said. You know we're going to survive this. You're going to die screaming. The woman spat blood at his feet. All of you. Matthias will burn this keep to ash and scatter your pack to the winds, and I'll watch from the south while drinking wine. Draven's expression didn't change. You won't live to see it. Execute her. The woman was dragged away, still laughing, a horrible, broken sound that echoed through the great hall long after she disappeared. Liana stood in the sudden silence, her hands trembling. 18 years. That woman had been poisoning this pack with information for 18 years, and no one had known. How much damage had she done? How many deaths could be traced back to her betrayal? "It's over," Draven said, approaching her. "The last of the internal threats are contained. Now we can focus on the external ones." "Is it ever really over?" Liana asked quietly. "Even after we win this war, if we win, how do you ever trust anyone again?" "You don't." Draven's answer was immediate and brutal. "You stay vigilant. You question everything. And you make the cost of betrayal so high that no one dares attempt it." Before Liana could respond, a horn blast echoed from the outer walls, 3 long notes that made every warrior in the keep freeze. "What is that?" Liana demanded. "Enemy sighted!" Draven was already moving toward the doors. Vyre's army just appeared on the horizon. They weren't supposed to arrive until tomorrow, which meant Matthias had marched his troops through the night, sacrificing rest for the element of surprise. The war had arrived early, and Bloodridge Keep wasn't ready. Liana ran after Draven as he sprinted toward the battlements, warriors flooding from every corridor to join him. When they reached the top of the walls, her breath caught. The valley below was filled with soldiers, thousands of them, their armor glinting in the afternoon sun, banners bearing Vyre's colors snapping in the wind, siege engines, cavalry, infantry formations stretching as far as the eye could see, and at the front, mounted on a massive warhorse, sat a figure Liana recognized even at this distance. Matthias, her cousin, the architect of this entire nightmare. He raised one hand, and a rider broke from the ranks, carrying a white flag of parley. The rider approached the gates and stopped just outside arrow range. "Draven Kael," the rider shouted. "Lord Matthias Vire demands the return of his cousin, Liana, who was taken under false pretenses. Surrender her immediately, and we will negotiate terms. Refuse, and we will take her by force." The lie was breathtaking in its audacity. Taken under false pretenses. As if she hadn't been sent here deliberately. As if the treaty hadn't been Vyre's idea in the first place. Draven's hands gripped the stone battlements hard enough to crack them. "Send this message back to Matthias," he called down to the rider. "Liana Vier is now Liana Kael. She is Pack. She is protected, and if he wants her, he can come and take her from my corpse." The rider's eyes widened. Then he wheeled his horse and galloped back to the army. Beside Draven, Liana stood frozen. Had he actually? "You claimed me," she whispered. "I claimed you," Draven confirmed, not looking at her. "Which means Matthias can't use the treaty as justification anymore. This is no longer about political agreements. It's about Pax sovereignty, and that changes everything." In the valley below, Matthias received the message. Even from this distance, Liana could see his rage. His horse reared. He drew his sword and pointed it directly at the keep. The army began to advance. No more parley, no more games, just war. "Battle stations," Draven roared. "Archers to the walls, infantry to the gates. This is what we trained for. Show them what happens when they threaten our pack." Warriors scattered to obey, the keep erupting into organized chaos. But Liana remained on the battlements, watching her cousin lead 2,000 soldiers toward the home she'd claimed, the pack she'd chosen, the brutal Alpha King who'd just declared her worth fighting for. The storm was here, and she stood at its center, no longer a pawn but a catalyst, the spark that would either forge this pack into something unbreakable or burn it to ash. Draven's hand closed around hers, warm and solid despite the cold mountain wind. "Whatever happens," he said quietly, "you don't face it alone." Liana squeezed his hand in return. Then the first siege stones began to fly, and the Battle of Bloodridge Keep began. The first siege stone struck the eastern wall with a sound like thunder-splitting stone. Liana felt the impact through her boots as the entire keep shuddered. Dust and debris rained from the battlements. Warriors braced themselves, arrows nocked, waiting for Draven's command. Below in the valley, Vyre's army advanced in perfect formation, shields locked, siege engines rolling forward with mechanical precision. "Hold!" Draven's voice cut through the chaos. "Wait until they're in range!" Liana watched the approaching army with a strange detachment. 2,000 soldiers. Professional killers trained and equipped by one of the wealthiest kingdoms in the south. And they were coming for her. Because she dared to survive. Because she'd exposed their conspiracy. Because Matthias couldn't tolerate the humiliation of his pawn becoming a player. Another siege stone arced through the air, this one striking the gate tower. The ancient wood groaned, but held. "They're testing our defenses," Vera said, appearing beside them, "trying to find weak points before committing to a full assault." "Then let's give them something to think about." Draven turned to his archers. "Target their siege engines. Make every shot count. We don't have arrows to waste." The archers loosed in perfect synchronization. Flaming arrows streaked across the sky, falling among Vyre's ranks like deadly rain. Men screamed. One siege engine caught fire, its operator scrambling away as flames consumed the wooden framework. But there were too many. For every engine damaged, 3 more rolled forward. "My king," the weapons master called from down the wall. "They're setting up ladders on the south face. Infantry preparing to scale." "Send the reserves." Draven didn't hesitate. "And someone get burning oil to the south battlements, now." Warriors sprinted to obey. Liana stood in the midst of controlled chaos, feeling utterly helpless. She could heal, could sense poison, could expose traitors. But she couldn't fight, couldn't shoot a bow or swing a sword, couldn't do anything except watch as the pack she'd claimed, and who'd claimed her, bled to defend her. "You shouldn't be here," Draven said, not looking at her. "Get below. The healer's wing. That's where you're needed." "No." The word surprised even her with its firmness. "I stay. If this is about me, I don't hide while warriors die." Draven's jaw tightened, but he didn't argue. Perhaps he understood. Perhaps he simply didn't have time. The battle intensified. Ladders slammed against the southern wall. Warriors rushed to repel them, pouring burning oil down on attackers who screamed and fell. Arrows flew in both directions, Vyre's forces shooting up at the battlements. Draven's archers returning fire with devastating accuracy. But the numbers were wrong. For every Vyre soldier that fell, 2 more took his place. Draven's pack was fighting with everything they had, but exhaustion would claim them eventually. Weeks of poison, weeks of sickness, and now this. An army at their gates demanding blood. A horn blast sounded from the western approach, different from before. 3 short bursts followed by 2 long. "That's our signal," Vera said, a fierce smile crossing her face. "The supply raid teams are engaging." Hope flickered in Liana's chest. The small teams Draven had sent into the mountains the previous night, the ones tasked with cutting Vyre's supply lines while the main army focused on the siege. If they succeeded, if they could disrupt the southern forces' logistics even slightly. An explosion echoed from somewhere beyond the valley. Then another. Orange flames erupted in the distance. Supply wagons, Liana realized. Burning. The raid teams had found their targets. Matthias's army wavered. Officers shouted orders, trying to maintain formation while warriors peeled off to defend the rear. Confusion rippled through the ranks. "Press them," Draven roared. "While they're divided." The keep's defenders redoubled their efforts. More flaming arrows, more oil. Warriors on the battlements hurled whatever they could find, stones, broken weapons, pieces of shattered siege equipment, down on the attackers below. Slowly, impossibly, Vyre's advance stalled. But the victory was temporary. Liana could see Matthias rallying his forces, see fresh troops moving forward to replace those defending the supply lines. The raid had bought them time, maybe an hour, maybe less, but it hadn't broken the siege. They needed something more, something decisive. "Draven," Liana said urgently, "we have to change the equation. This siege will grind both sides down until there's nothing left. We need to force Matthias into a mistake." "I'm open to suggestions," he said grimly, watching as another ladder was pushed away from the wall. "Use me." Liana's voice was steady despite her racing heart. "You said he'd demand my return, that he'd try to capture me. So give him the opportunity. Let him think I'm exposed, vulnerable. When he commits forces to take me, we hit him with everything. We discussed this in council. Setting that trap takes preparation, staging. Warriors, we don't have to spare right now. Then improvise." Liana grabbed his arm, forcing him to look at her. "Matthias is down there, watching this keep like a hawk. He knows every stone, every defensive position, but he doesn't know me. Doesn't know what I'm capable of. Use that. Use his arrogance. Draven studied her for a long moment. Then something shifted in his expression, calculation giving way to decision. Vera, he called. I need a small strike team, your best hunters. 5 warriors, no more. For what purpose, my king? We're going to give Matthias exactly what he wants. Draven's smile was cold and dangerous. Bait he can't resist. 20 minutes later, Lyanna stood in a small stone watchtower on the keep's eastern flank, the most exposed position, visible from the valley, but far enough from the main defenses to appear isolated. She wore a distinctive cloak, deep blue, trimmed with silver, the colors of House Vire. Anyone looking from below would recognize it immediately. Recognize her. This is insane, Mira whispered from the shadows behind her. The girl had insisted on coming, refused to let Lyanna face this alone. If they breach this tower, they won't. Lyanna hoped she sounded more confident than she felt. Draven's warriors are positioned below. The moment Vire's forces commit to taking this position, they'll be surrounded. And if something goes wrong, then I run very fast. It wasn't a good plan. It was barely a plan at all. But desperation made strategists out of everyone. Lyanna stepped to the window, making herself clearly visible. Below, the siege continued, but she could see officers pointing up at her position, see messengers racing back toward the command tent where Matthias coordinated his attack. Come on, she thought, take the bait. Prove you're as predictable as I remember. Minutes crawled past. The battle raged. Then, movement. A contingent of soldiers broke from the main force, perhaps 50 men, moving with purpose toward the eastern approach. Not a full assault. A surgical strike team meant to scale the tower quickly and extract their target before reinforcements could respond. They're coming, Mira breathed. Good. Lyanna's hands clenched. Tell Draven, now. Mira disappeared down the stairs. Lyanna remained at the window, watching the strike team approach. They moved with professional efficiency. No wasted motion, no hesitation. These were elite soldiers, not conscripts. Matthias had sent his best. The first grappling hook struck the tower wall with metallic clangs. Ropes pulled taut. Soldiers began climbing with frightening speed. Lyanna backed away from the window, her heart hammering. Any moment now, Draven's warriors would spring the trap, would catch these soldiers exposed on the ropes. A massive warrior pulled himself through the window. Too fast. They were too fast. The warrior's eyes locked on Lyanna. There you are, little cousin. Lord Matthias sends his regards. She recognized him. Captain Theron, one of Matthias's personal guard. A man who'd watched her grow up and never once acknowledged her existence. Now he looked at her like she was prey. Come quietly, Theron said, drawing a blade. Make this easy. No. His expression hardened. Then we do this the hard way. More soldiers poured through the window. 5, 7, 10. Too many. Where was Draven? Where were the warriors who were supposed to be waiting? Lyanna ran. She bolted down the narrow staircase, her boots slipping on ancient stone. Behind her, soldiers gave chase. Their armor clanked. Their breathing was harsh and close. She could feel them gaining with every step. She burst out of the tower's base and into the courtyard, and froze. Draven's warriors were there, but they weren't fighting. They were down. Scattered across the ground, unconscious or worse, surrounded by soldiers wearing blood-ridge colors but with eyes that held no loyalty. More traitors, hidden deeper than the ones they'd found, activated now, at the worst possible moment. No, Lyanna whispered. Surprise. Matthias stepped from behind a pillar, his sword drawn, his smile vicious. He'd been inside the keep. Somehow, impossibly, he'd gotten inside. Did you really think I'd leave something this important to chance? Theron and his soldiers emerged from the tower behind Lyanna, cutting off her retreat. She was surrounded, trapped, and the sounds of battle from the main walls were too far away. No one would hear if she screamed. This ends now, Matthias said, approaching slowly. You've caused enough damage, little cousin. Time to come home, or what's left of you anyway. Lyanna's mind raced. The gift. Could she use it? Disrupt their heartbeats like she'd done to Rylan? But there were too many. Even if she dropped Matthias, his soldiers would cut her down before she could affect them all. Nothing to say? Matthias mocked. Where's that spine you supposedly grew up here in the frozen north? Where's your Alpha King now? Right here. Draven dropped from the tower roof like a falling star, landing in the center of the courtyard with enough force to crack the stone beneath his boots. His sword was already moving, a horizontal slash that took down 2 traitor warriors before they could react. Then chaos erupted. More of Draven's warriors poured into the courtyard. The real ones, emerging from hiding positions Lyanna hadn't even known existed. They'd been waiting, watching, letting Matthias commit fully before springing their own trap. You fell for it, Draven said, his ice-blue eyes locked on Matthias, just like she said you would. Arrogant, reckless, predictable. Matthias's face contorted with rage. Kill them! Kill them all! The courtyard became a storm of steel and blood. Draven moved through enemy soldiers like death incarnate, each strike precise and lethal. His warriors fought with renewed strength, the ones Lyanna had healed now proving their worth, their bodies responding with power that had been stolen from them for months. But Matthias was moving toward Lyanna, his own blade raised. She had seconds to decide. Run and hope Draven could reach her in time, or stand and fight with the only weapon she had. Lyanna chose to stand. As Matthias closed the distance, she opened her senses and reached. Not to kill. She didn't have the strength for that, didn't have the ruthlessness. But to disrupt. She found his heartbeat, felt the rhythm of blood and breath, and threw everything she had into knocking it off balance. Matthias stumbled mid-stride, his eyes widening in shock. What? Draven's fist caught him in the jaw before he could finish. Matthias went down hard, his sword clattering across the stones. Draven's blade was at his throat a heartbeat later. Yield, Draven commanded. Around them, the fighting was ending. Vair's elite strike team was dead or captured. The traitor warriors were subdued, and Matthias, Lord Matthias Vier, architect of conspiracy and assassination, lay bleeding on the stones with a Wolf King's sword at his throat. Yield, Draven repeated. Or die here. Choose quickly. Matthias's eyes burned with hatred, but survival won out. I yield. Draven hauled him up roughly and shoved him toward Vera, who'd appeared with reinforcements. Bind him, and send a messenger to his army. Tell them their commander is captured. Tell them they have 1 hour to withdraw, or we execute him and mount his head on the gates. You wouldn't dare, Matthias spat. I'm nobility. There are rules. You poisoned my pack, sent assassins after an Omega under my protection, infiltrated my keep with traitors. Draven's voice was colder than the mountain wind. You violated every rule of honorable warfare. So yes, I would dare. Gladly. The certainty in his words broke something in Matthias. His shoulders slumped. The fight went out of him like air from a punctured bladder. As he was dragged away, Lyanna finally allowed herself to breathe. Her legs nearly gave out, but Draven caught her, his arm solid and warm around her shoulders. You all right? He asked quietly. I will be. She looked up at him. We actually did it. We caught him. You caught him. Draven's expression softened slightly. Your plan, your bait, your strategy. This victory is yours. Before she could respond, a horn sounded from the main walls, but this time it wasn't a warning. It was 3 long, clear notes, the signal for enemy withdrawal. Vair's army was retreating. Warriors on the battlements began to cheer. The sound spread through the keep like wildfire. Celebration, relief, triumph. They'd held. Against impossible odds, against treachery and poison and an army 10 times their size, Bloodridge Keep had held. Lyanna closed her eyes and let the sound wash over her. They'd won. Not completely. The war wasn't over. Vier would regroup. There would be consequences and complications, but they'd won this battle. This day. This desperate, brutal stand against everything that had tried to destroy them. Come on, Draven said gently. You need rest, and the healer's wing needs you. We took casualties. Right. The cost of victory. Lyanna straightened, pushing exhaustion aside. There would be time to collapse later. Right now, warriors needed her. The healer's wing was organized chaos when they arrived. Wounded warriors lined every available bed, with more sitting against the walls waiting for treatment. Osric and his assistants moved between them with practiced efficiency, but the sheer number of injured was overwhelming. Liana rolled up her sleeves and got to work. One by one, she moved through the wounded. A sword slash across the ribs. She knit the torn tissue, stopped the bleeding. A shattered shoulder from a fall. She realigned the bone, encouraged the body's natural healing. Burns from the oil defenses. She soothed the damaged skin, reduced inflammation. Hours blurred together. Her hands trembled with exhaustion. Her head throbbed. The gift demanded more and more energy with each healing, draining her reserves until she could barely stand. But she didn't stop, because these warriors had fought for her, had bled defending a keep she'd only known for days, had trusted an outsider Omega when everything in their instincts should have told them to cast her out. She owed them this, owed them everything. "Lady Liana," Osric's voice cut through her focus. "You need to rest. You're swaying on your feet." "One more," she mumbled. "Just one more." "No." Firm hands guided her to a chair. "You've healed 37 warriors today. Any more and you'll collapse. I won't allow it." Liana wanted to argue, but her body betrayed her. She slumped in the chair, every muscle screaming, her vision swimming. Osric was right. She'd pushed too far. Again. "You did well," Osric said softly. "More than well. Half these warriors would have died without you. Remember that." She nodded weakly and let her eyes close, just for a moment, just to rest. When she opened them again, the light had changed. Evening had fallen. Someone had covered her with a blanket, and the healer's wing was quieter now. The urgent cases treated, the worst of the crisis past. Mira sat beside her, keeping watch. "How long was I out?" Liana asked, her voice hoarse. 4 hours. Mira offered her a cup of water. "Drink Osric's orders." Liana obeyed, the cool liquid soothing her parched throat. "The wounded?" "Stable. 3 didn't make it, but the rest will recover, thanks to you." Mira's expression was awed. "They're calling you the Healing Wolf. Did you know that? The warriors you saved are spreading stories. They say you pulled them back from death itself." "That's dramatic." "Maybe," Mira smiled, "but true. You changed everything, Lady Liana. This pack sees you now, really sees you." Liana absorbed that in silence. She'd come to this keep as an unwanted bride, a political sacrifice no one expected to survive. And now she was something else entirely. Not just tolerated, not just useful. Pack. "The Alpha Kings wants to see you," Mira added. "When you're ready. He's in the Great Hall." Liana stood carefully, testing her legs. Still shaky, but functional. "Then I shouldn't keep him waiting." The Great Hall had been transformed into a command center. Maps covered every surface. Warriors reported in and out constantly. Messengers brought updates from the borders, from the retreating Vyre forces, from the supply raid teams returning victorious. And at the center of it all sat Draven, orchestrating his pack's defense with the same brutal efficiency he'd shown on the battlefield. He looked up when Liana entered, and something in his expression shifted. Not quite a smile, but close. "You're awake. Good." He gestured for her to approach. "We need to talk." Liana moved through the controlled chaos and stood beside him. Up close, she could see the strain in his eyes, the tension in his shoulders. He'd been fighting for hours, then managing the aftermath, leading, always leading, never resting. "Matthias is in the cells," Draven said without preamble. "He's talking, trying to bargain for his life, but the information he's providing is valuable." "What kind of information?" "The full extent of Vyre's conspiracy, names of other agents in neighboring territories, details about the poison's creation and distribution, and..." Draven's jaw tightened. He confirmed that this war was never about territory or resources. It was about pride. "Your king wanted my pack destroyed because we refused to bow to Southern authority. You were sent here as a convenient excuse." Liana's hands clenched. So every death, every poisoning, every act of treachery, all of it was just political theater. "Welcome to the reality of kingdoms and power." Draven's voice was bitter. People die, packs burn, and rulers sleep soundly because they never have to see the consequences of their decisions. What happens now? Liana asked quietly. To Matthias? To the war? Matthias will be tried by pack law. His crimes are against us, so we have jurisdiction. As for the war, Draven stood, moving to one of the maps. Vyre's army retreated, but they haven't disbanded. They're regrouping at the border, waiting for new orders. My scouts report additional forces mobilizing in the south. This isn't over. But we changed the equation, Liana said, studying the map. We captured their field commander, exposed their conspiracy, proved that this pack can't be broken by poison or treachery or overwhelming force. That has to mean something. It means they'll come at us differently next time. Draven's eyes met hers. But it also means we have leverage. Matthias is valuable. His family will want him back. And negotiations from a position of strength look very different than negotiations from weakness. Liana felt a surge of fierce pride. This was the pack she'd chosen. Brutal when necessary, but smart. Strategic. Willing to fight, but not foolish enough to waste lives on pointless battles. There's something else, Draven said, his voice dropping lower. The warriors I sent on the supply raids, they found more than supply wagons. They found a forward staging area, tents, equipment, documents. And among those documents, he handed her a sealed letter bearing her family's crest. Liana broke the seal with trembling fingers and read. The words made her blood run cold. It was a kill order, signed by her uncle, the king of Vyre himself. Specific instructions. Liana Vyre was to be eliminated by any means necessary. She'd become a liability, a loose end that knew too much. Whether the pack destroyed her or Vyre's agents succeeded, the outcome was the same. Her own family had sentenced her to death. They never intended for me to survive, she whispered. From the moment they sent me north, this was the plan. Use me to justify war, then eliminate me before I could expose the truth. I know. Yet Draven's hand settled on her shoulder, warm and solid. And I'm sorry. Whatever you were to them before, whatever blood you share, doesn't matter anymore. They made their choice. Liana looked up at him, this brutal wolf king who'd defended her when her own family wanted her dead. And what choice do I have now? Any choice you want. Draven's ice blue eyes held hers. You saved my pack, exposed our enemies, stood beside us in battle. As far as I'm concerned, you've earned your place here. If you want to stay, you stay. If you want to leave once this war is settled, I'll give you safe passage anywhere you wish to go. But know this, his voice softened slightly. You're pack now, Liana. Whatever that means to you, whatever you decide, you're one of us. The words hit harder than any blade. Pack. Not because of a treaty or political arrangement, but because she'd proven herself, because she'd chosen them, and they'd chosen her back. I want to stay, she said, the decision crystallizing with absolute clarity. Vyre isn't my home anymore. Maybe it never was. But this, she gestured to the hall, to the warriors moving with purpose, to the keep that had withstood a siege because its people refused to break. This feels like home. Something shifted in Draven's expression, not quite vulnerability, but close. Then it settled. Your Bloodridge pack. And anyone who comes for you comes for all of us. Before Liana could respond, Vera entered with a warrior she didn't recognize, young, barely 20, his clothes marked with the dust of hard travel. My king, Vera announced, a messenger from the Northern Alliance. They've heard about the siege. The Northern Alliance, a coalition of packs that shared these mountains, bound by mutual defense treaties and trade agreements. If they were responding to the siege, it meant word had spread fast. Speak, Draven commanded. The young warrior stepped forward, nervous but determined. Alpha King Draven Kale, the Alliance sends word. They've received reports of southern aggression against Bloodridge territory. The Council convenes in 3 days to discuss response. Your presence is requested. Requested or required? Draven asked dryly. Requested, my king, but the messenger hesitated. The Council wishes to hear your account personally, and to meet the Omega who exposed the conspiracy and saved your pack from destruction. Every eye in the hall turned to Liana. She felt the weight of their attention, the the significance of what was being asked. The Northern Alliance wanted to see her, wanted to hear her story, wanted to understand what had happened here. "Tell the council we'll be there," Draven said firmly. "Both of us." The messenger bowed and departed. As he left, conversations erupted throughout the hall. Speculation, planning, debate about what the Alliance's interest meant for Bloodridge's future. But Lyanna focused on Draven. "Both of us? You're the reason we're still standing," he said simply. "And if we're going to turn this from a siege into a larger conflict, if we're going to make Vyre answer for what they did, we need the Alliance's support. They need to hear from you, need to see what Vyre tried to destroy." Lyanna understood. This was bigger than one pack now. Bigger than a single siege or a captured lord. This was about precedent, about whether southern kingdoms could poison northern packs without consequence, about whether the Alliance would stand together or fracture under pressure. 3 days, she said. That's not much time to prepare. Then we'd better start now. Draven turned to his assembled warriors. "I want a full damage assessment by morning. Casualty counts, supply status, defensive readiness. And someone send a message to our outlying territories. I want every pack leader informed about what happened here. No secrets, no lies. Just the truth." "Yes, my king." As the warriors dispersed to their tasks, Draven looked at Lyanna with something approaching respect. "You should rest. Tomorrow will be longer than today." "So should you," she countered. "I will, eventually." His mouth curved slightly. "But first, I have a kingdom to hold together." But Lyanna watched him return to his maps and reports, this uncompromising leader who'd claimed her as pack and defended that claim with blood. 3 days ago, she'd been nothing to him. A political obligation, a potential threat. Now she was something else entirely. As she left the Great Hall, warriors nodded to her in passing, not with tolerance or suspicion, but with genuine respect. She'd earned this, earned it through courage and sacrifice and a stubborn refusal to break when everything demanded she bend. Mira waited in the corridor outside, a knowing smile on her face. "The healing wolf walks among us." "Stop calling me that," Lyanna said, but without heat. "Why? It's true, and better than the Southern Omega, don't you think?" Lyanna couldn't argue with that. They walked together through the keep, past warriors repairing battle damage, past the healer's wing where soft groans spoke of pain and recovery, past the armory where weapons were being resharpened for whatever came next. Bloodridge Keep had survived, battered but unbroken, and Lyanna had helped make that survival possible. But as she climbed the stairs toward her chambers, toward Draven's chambers, where she'd been sleeping since the assassination attempt, she couldn't shake the feeling that this victory was only the beginning. Vir wouldn't forget this humiliation, wouldn't forgive their captured lord or their failed conspiracy. War was coming. Real war, not just a siege, and when it arrived, Lyanna would be ready, because she wasn't a sacrifice anymore, wasn't a pawn or a political tool. She was pack, and she would defend her home with everything she had. The journey to the Northern Alliance stronghold took 2 days through mountain passes still choked with winter snow. Lyanna rode beside Draven at the head of a small contingent, 20 warriors handpicked for both skill and loyalty. Vera led the rear guard. Osric traveled with them, carrying detailed documentation of the poisoning conspiracy. And Mira had insisted on coming, refusing to let Lyanna face the Alliance Council without at least one familiar face in the crowd. The landscape was brutal and beautiful in equal measure. Sheer cliffs dropped into valleys filled with ancient pines. Eagles circled overhead, their cries echoing off stone walls that had witnessed centuries of pack conflicts and alliances. This was the heart of the Northern Territories, wild, unforgiving, and fiercely independent. "Nervous?" Draven asked as they crested a ridge and saw their destination spread below. Iron Peak Hold was carved directly into the mountainside, a fortress that made Bloodridge Keep look modest by comparison. Massive gates stood open, revealing courtyards filled with warriors from a dozen different packs. Banners snapped in the wind, each bearing the symbols of Alliance members. "Terrified," Lyanna admitted. "What if they don't believe me? What if they think this is just a territorial dispute between packs and kingdoms? Then we show them the evidence." Draven's voice was calm, confident. "Matthias's confession, the poison samples, The documents from Vyre's forward camp, and you, living proof that southern kingdoms see northern pacts as problems to eliminate, not partners to negotiate with. No pressure, then. His mouth curved slightly. You faced worse. You survived a siege. You can survive politicians. Liana wasn't entirely sure which was more dangerous, but she kept that thought to herself. They entered Iron Peak Hold to a reception that was more interrogation than welcome. Alliance guards examined their weapons, their supplies, their documentation with suspicious thoroughness. Word of Bloodridge's siege had spread, but so had rumors. Some claiming Draven had manufactured the crisis to justify Southern aggression, others suggesting Liana was a Southern spy who'd orchestrated everything. Trust was in short supply. The council chamber was a circular room built around a massive fire pit, with stone benches arranged in ascending tiers. 12 Alpha leaders sat in positions of honor. Some Liana recognized from descriptions, most she didn't. All of them radiated power and authority, their alpha auras filling the space with tangible pressure. At the highest tier sat Magnus Ironpeak, the Alliance's elected first alpha, a man in his 60s with silver hair and scars that told stories of a lifetime spent defending these mountains. His eyes were sharp and calculating as Draven and Liana entered. Draven Kale, Magnus said, his voice carrying easily through the chamber. You've brought interesting times to our borders. Southern armies, poisoned packs, captured nobility. The Alliance would hear your account, and you'll have it. Draven moved to the center of the chamber, Liana at his side. But first, I want to make something clear. What happened at Bloodridge wasn't an isolated incident. It was a coordinated attack designed to destabilize northern territories and justify southern expansion. If they succeeded with my pack, yours would have been next. Murmurs rippled through the assembled alphas. One, a woman with braided red hair and a scar across her throat, leaned forward. Strong accusation, KL. Can you prove it? I can. Draven gestured to Osric, who stepped forward with a leather satchel. 6 months of systematic poisoning, documented evidence of southern agents operating inside my keep, letters bearing the seal of Vyre's king, ordering the elimination of his own niece when she became inconvenient, and the testimony of Lord Matthias Veer himself. Osric began distributing copies of the documents. Liana watched as alpha after alpha read, their expressions shifting from skepticism to shock to cold fury. This Omega, Magnus said, his eyes fixing on Liana. Liana Vyre, you were the treaty bride they sent north? Yes, first alpha. Liana's voice was steady despite her racing heart. I was sent to marry Alpha Draven as part of a peace agreement, but the treaty was a lie. Veer never intended peace. They intended to use me as a scapegoat, someone to blame when their poisoning campaign was discovered, someone expendable. Yet you exposed the conspiracy. This from a younger alpha, his dark eyes curious. Why? Your kingdom sent you. Your blood signed those orders. Why betray them? The question hung in the air, loaded with implications. This was the moment, the test. Everything depended on her answer. Because they betrayed me first, Liana said, her voice ringing clear. I was raised to believe duty and honor mattered, that family protected family, that kingdoms acted with integrity. But Vyre sent me north to die, used me as a weapon without my knowledge, condemned me the moment I became inconvenient. So yes, I chose to stand with the pack that gave me a chance over the kingdom that threw me away. And I'd make that choice again. Silence. Then Magnus spoke, his tone thoughtful. You possess a rare gift, I'm told. Healing abilities that saved Bloodridge's warriors. I do. Liana met his gaze without flinching. And I've used it to heal over 60 warriors in the past week. I'll use it to heal any Alliance member who needs it, because this isn't about me anymore. It's about whether the Alliance will stand together against kingdoms that see us as obstacles to be removed. Brave words. The red-haired alpha, Liana had learned her name was Kira Bloodstone, stood and descended to the chamber floor. But words are easy. Actions matter. You say you chose pack over kingdom. Prove it. How? Liana asked. Kira smiled, sharp and dangerous. My pack suffered a hunting accident 3 days ago. 5 warriors injured, 2 critically. Our healer says they'll survive, but recovery will take months. If your gift is real, if your loyalty to the Alliance is genuine, heal them, now. It was a test and a gamble. If Liana succeeded, she'd prove her worth beyond question. If she failed, or worse, if she was somehow deceiving them, she'd be exposed in front of the entire Alliance Council. "Take me to them," Liana said without hesitation. Set. The Bloodstone Pack's injured warriors were housed in a healing wing that smelled of herbs and pain. Liana entered to find 5 beds occupied by men in various states of injury. The 2 critical cases were immediately obvious, both unconscious, their breathing shallow, their skin pale from blood loss. The other 3 were awake but clearly suffering, their faces tight with suppressed agony. Kira stood in the doorway, arms crossed, watching with predatory focus. Behind her, several Alliance Alphas had followed, witnesses to either validation or exposure. "Well," Kira said, "you claimed you could heal. Show us." Liana approached the first critical case, a young warrior whose chest had been crushed by a falling tree. His ribs were shattered, his lung punctured. The pack's healer had stabilized him, but the damage was extensive. Recovery would indeed take months if he survived at all. She placed her hands on his chest and closed her eyes. The gift opened like a door swinging wide. Liana felt the warrior's broken body, felt the jagged edges of bone and the blood pooling where it shouldn't be, felt his life force struggling to maintain rhythm against overwhelming damage. And she began to restore it. She guided the bones back into alignment, encouraged the body's natural healing to accelerate beyond normal limits. She sealed the punctured lung, cleared the pooled blood, restored the flow of oxygen and energy that had been disrupted. It wasn't magic. She couldn't create new tissue from nothing, but she could help the body remember what health felt like, could push it to heal in hours what would normally take months. Sweat beaded on her forehead. Her hands trembled. The gift demanded energy. She was still recovering from the siege, but she didn't stop. Couldn't stop. Not with the Alliance watching. Not with everything riding on this moment. Minutes passed. Then, the warrior's eyes opened. He gasped, his chest expanding fully for the first time in days. Color flooded back into his face. He sat up slowly, testing his movements, his expression shifting from confusion to wonder. "I can breathe," he whispered. "It doesn't hurt." A collective intake of breath rippled through the watching Alphas. Liana moved to the second critical case without pausing, a warrior whose leg had been nearly severed in the accident. The pack's healer had saved the limb, but infection had set in. Amputation was being discussed as a necessary evil. She placed her hands on the damaged leg and dove deep into the infection, identifying the foreign bacteria and helping the body's immune system recognize and eliminate them. She knit torn muscle, repaired shredded nerves, restored blood flow to tissue that was dying. The warrior woke halfway through the process, his eyes widening as he watched the swelling in his leg visibly reduce, watched color return to flesh that had been gray and mottled. "What are you?" he breathed. "Just someone who cares," Liana replied softly, and moved to the next bed. By the time she finished all 5 warriors, she could barely stand. Mira caught her as she swayed, supporting her weight while Liana fought to stay conscious. The gift had taken everything she had and demanded more. Her vision swam. Her head pounded. But all 5 warriors were sitting up, moving, testing bodies that had been broken and were now whole. Kira approached slowly, her expression unreadable. Then she dropped to one knee. "Bloodstone Pack owes you a debt," she said formally. "Those warriors are my blood, my family. You saved them. Whatever prejudice I held against a Southern Omega, whatever suspicion, consider it gone. You are Pack. You are Alliance." One by one, the other Alphas who'd witnessed the healing knelt as well, a show of respect so profound it made Liana's eyes burn. "Rise," she managed. "Please, I didn't do this for debts or respect. I did it because it was right, because we're stronger together than divided." Magnus Ironpeak, who'd watched from the doorway, stepped forward. His weathered face held something Liana couldn't quite identify. "In 50 years leading this alliance, I've seen many remarkable things, but I've never seen anything like you, Liana Kale." The name hit her like a physical blow. Not Vire, Kale. He'd called her by Draven's name, acknowledging her as Pack, as belonging to Bloodridge. The question before this council, Magnus continued, addressing the room, is whether Southern Kingdom's actions against Bloodridge constitute an act of war against the Alliance itself. I believe we have our answer. The council deliberations lasted through the night and into the next morning. Lyanna wasn't present for most of it. She was recovering in guest quarters, Mira watching over her while she slept off the exhaustion of healing 5 warriors in quick succession. But Draven attended every moment, presenting evidence, answering challenges, building the case that Vyre's actions demanded a unified response. When Lyanna finally woke, it was to find Draven sitting in a chair beside her bed, his expression thoughtful. "What did I miss?" she asked, her voice hoarse. "Everything and nothing." He offered her water, which she drank gratefully. The Alliance voted. Unanimous decision. Vyre's poisoning campaign is considered an act of war against Northern territories. The Alliance is mobilizing. Mobilizing for what? Retribution. Draven's voice was grim. Not invasion. We're not conquerors. But trade sanctions, border closures, diplomatic isolation, and a formal demand for reparations, including the extradition of everyone involved in the conspiracy. The Alliance is sending emissaries to every Southern Kingdom, making it clear that attacking one pack means attacking all of us. Lyanna absorbed this. Vyre won't accept those terms. No, Draven agreed. They'll refuse. Bluster about Northern aggression. Maybe try to rally other Southern Kingdoms to their cause. But the Alliance has something they don't: unity. 12 packs speaking with one voice, backed by warriors who've seen what Southern treachery looks like. That changes the equation. And Matthias? Being transferred to Iron Peak Hold. The Alliance wants him tried publicly, with representatives from every pack present. His crimes were against all of us, so all of us get to witness justice. Draven's smile was cold. Magnus suggested you be one of the tribunal judges. Me? Lyanna sat up too quickly, her head spinning. I don't have the authority. You're the victim who became a warrior, the Omega who exposed the conspiracy and saved a pack from destruction. You have more moral authority than any Alpha in that council chamber. Draven's expression softened slightly. But it's your choice. If you'd rather not face him again, no one would blame you. Lyanna thought about it. Thought about Matthias, her cousin, who'd sent her north to die, who'd orchestrated months of suffering and death, who'd looked at her in that courtyard with nothing but contempt for daring to survive. I'll do it, she said quietly. Someone needs to speak for everyone he hurt, for the warriors who died from poison, for the families torn apart by his conspiracy. I'll do it. Draven nodded, unsurprised. Then we have 3 days before the trial. The Alliance is using that time to gather additional evidence, bring in witnesses, prepare the case. In the meantime, he stood and offered his hand. There's someone who wants to meet you. Magnus Iron Peak's private study was lined with ancient texts and battle maps that chronicled centuries of Alliance history. The old Alpha stood at a window overlooking the mountain ranges, his posture straight despite his years. When Lyanna entered with Draven, he turned and studied her with those sharp, calculating eyes. Lyanna Kale, he said, tasting the name. Sit. We have much to discuss. Lyanna took the offered seat, Draven standing behind her in a position that was clearly protective. I've been First Alpha for 50 years, Magnus began without preamble. In that time, I've seen the Alliance face many threats. Wars with Southern Kingdoms, internal conflicts between packs, resource shortages, political conspiracies. But I've never seen anything quite like what happened at Bloodridge. Neither have I, Lyanna said honestly. You're an Omega with a gift that challenges everything we understand about pack dynamics. You're Southern nobility who chose Northern loyalty. You're a healer who stands in the middle of battlefields. You're, Magnus paused, choosing his words carefully. An anomaly. And anomalies either become legends or cautionary tales. The question is which? I'm just trying to survive, Lyanna said, and help others survive. Nothing legendary about that. Modest, Magnus smiled slightly. Or smart. Hard to tell which. But here's what I see. You've already changed the Alliance, whether you intended to or not. Every Alpha in that council chamber watched you heal warriors they'd written off as crippled. Watched you stand before them without fear or submission, speaking truth to power. That kind of courage, That kind of ability. It inspires people, makes them believe impossible things are achievable. What are you asking me? Lyanna asked carefully. Nothing yet. Magnus moved to his desk and pulled out a scroll sealed with the Alliance crest. But I'm offering something. After Matthias's trial, after the political dust settles, the Alliance will need to rebuild trust with southern kingdoms who weren't involved in Vair's conspiracy. We'll need mediators, people who understand both sides, people who can bridge the divide between northern independence and southern ambition. He set the scroll in front of her. This is a formal appointment as Alliance ambassador. You travel between territories, negotiate treaties, identify threats before they become conspiracies. Use that gift of yours to heal not just bodies, but political wounds. Build connections that prevent future wars. Lyanna stared at the scroll, her heart pounding. Why me? Because you're the only person in these mountains who's lived on both sides, who understands what it means to be used and discarded by kingdoms, and what it means to be valued and protected by packs. That perspective is priceless. Magnus's expression grew serious. But I won't lie to you. It's dangerous work. You'd be traveling into territories that might see you as a traitor, facing people who'd rather kill you than negotiate, living between worlds without fully belonging to either. She already has a place, Draven said, his voice hard. At Bloodridge. As my... He stopped, the words catching. As your mate? Magnus finished gently. Say it, Draven. We all saw how you protected her during the siege, how you claimed her in front of Vair's army, how you stand here now ready to refuse an honor that could change the Alliance forever, because you can't bear the thought of her leaving. The silence that followed was deafening. Lyanna turned to look at Draven. His jaw was tight, his eyes fixed on some point beyond the window. But she could see the truth in the tension of his shoulders, the white-knuckled grip on his sword hilt. He cared, more than duty, more than political alliance. Somewhere between the siege and the healing and the desperate fight for survival, he'd started to care. And so had she. I need time, Lyanna said, turning back to Magnus, to think about this, to talk with Draven. This isn't a decision I can make alone. Fair, Magnus nodded. You have until after the trial, but consider it carefully, Lyanna KL. The Alliance needs people like you. The North needs people like you. And whether you choose politics or pack, know that you've already made a difference that will echo for generations. The trial of Lord Matthias Vire began 3 days later in Iron Peak Hold's Grand Forum. The space could hold 1,000 people, and it was packed to capacity. Warriors from every Alliance pack, witnesses brought from Bloodridge, southern merchants who'd been affected by the border closures, even a few southern nobles who'd come to observe the spectacle. Matthias stood in chains at the center of the forum, flanked by guards. He looked diminished somehow, the arrogance stripped away, replaced by something between defiance and despair. His eyes found Lyanna in the tribunal gallery and held there, burning with hatred. The charges were read by Magnus himself: conspiracy to commit mass murder, treason against the Alliance, coordination of espionage and sabotage operations, attempted assassination of an Omega under pack protection. The list went on. And on. Evidence was presented methodically. Osric testified about the poison and its effects. Warriors described finding the contaminated water sources. The captured assassins gave statements about their orders and payment from Vair agents. Documents were displayed for all to see: kill orders, payment ledgers, correspondence detailing the entire conspiracy. And through it all, Matthias said nothing. Just stood in his chains and glared, his silence more damning than any defense could have been. Finally, it was Lyanna's turn to speak. She stood before the assembled crowd, her voice steady despite the weight of 1,000 eyes on her. I was born into House Vair, she began. Raised to believe my kingdom valued honor and strength. Taught that family protected family. That duty mattered above all else. And I believed it. Even when I was dismissed and ignored. Even when I was sent north as a political sacrifice, I still believed. She looked directly at Matthias. But you taught me the truth, cousin. You showed me that kingdoms don't value honor. They value power. You showed me that family doesn't protect. It exploits. You sent me here to die. And when I dared to survive, you tried to finish the job personally. You betrayed your blood, Matthias spat, breaking his silence. You chose animals over civilization, savages over your own people. No, Lyanna said firmly. I chose people who valued me over a kingdom that used me. I chose warriors who bled defending someone they barely knew over nobility, who condemned family for political convenience. I chose life over the slow death you had planned for me. She turned to address the broader audience. This trial isn't about revenge. It's about precedent. It's about whether kingdoms can attack pacts without consequence, whether treaties mean anything, or if they're just paper to be burned when convenient, whether the alliance will stand together or be picked apart one pack at a time. Matisse Vire orchestrated months of suffering and death. He poisoned warriors who'd never wronged him. He corrupted pack members, turning them against their own. He led an army against people who'd only ever asked for peace. And he did it all for pride, for ambition, for a chance to prove himself to a king who probably forgot his name the moment he left for the north. The words landed like hammer blows. Even Matthias flinched. So I stand here not as his victim, Lyanna continued, but as witness to what happens when kingdoms lose their humanity, when power becomes the only currency that matters, when people are reduced to obstacles or assets instead of being seen as lives with value. She met Magnus's eyes. The Alliance can choose to respond with equal brutality, can choose to become the very thing Vire accused us of being, savages who only understand violence. Or we can show them what Northern justice really looks like, fair, swift, uncompromising, and absolutely certain. Your recommendation? Magnus asked quietly. Exile, Lyanna said. Strip him of titles and lands. Send him back to Vire in chains, a living testament to what happens when you attack the Alliance. Let him spend the rest of his life as a reminder to his king and every southern noble that the North will not be broken, will not be poisoned, will not bow. Matthias's face went white. You'd sentence me to... That's worse than death. Yes, Lyanna agreed. It is. Death would be mercy. This way, you live with what you've done. Live with the knowledge that you failed, that the Omega you tried to kill stood before the Alliance and proved everything you believed about weakness and strength was a lie. The tribunal deliberated for less than an hour. The verdict was unanimous. Exile. Matthias Vire would be stripped of all rank, all property, all rights. He would be returned to Vire's capital in chains with a formal declaration of his crimes delivered to the king. He would live, but as a symbol of southern failure and northern resolve. As guards dragged Matthias away, he screamed threats and curses that echoed through the forum. But no one listened. His power was gone, his legacy destroyed, and Lyanna watched him go with a strange sense of closure. This was the man who'd shaped her fate, who'd sent her to die, who'd represented everything wrong with the world she'd been born into. Now he was nothing, less than nothing, and she was standing in a forum filled with people who respected her courage, valued her gifts, and saw her as an equal. The contrast couldn't have been sharper. That night, the Alliance held a celebration feast. Warriors from a dozen packs filled Iron Peak Hold's Great Hall, sharing food and stories and relief that the crisis had been resolved without devastating war. Wine flowed, songs were sung, laughter echoed off ancient stone walls. Lyanna sat at the head table between Draven and Magnus, feeling oddly out of place despite being the guest of honor. She'd spent so much of her life invisible, dismissed, that being celebrated felt alien, wrong, somehow. You're thinking too much, Draven said quietly, reading her expression. Just accept that you did something remarkable and let people acknowledge it. I'm not used to acknowledgement. I've noticed. His mouth curved slightly. But you'd better get used to it. Every alpha in this hall wants to offer you a place in their pack. I've had 6 formal proposals already. Lyanna's eyes widened. What? Kira wants you as her pack's healer. Magnus suggested you join Iron Peak as an advisor. The Stonefang Alpha offered to make you his daughter's personal physician. Draven's expression was carefully neutral. They all see what you are, what you could become, and they all want to claim credit for recognizing it first. But I'm already... Lyanna stopped. I'm already Bloodridge, aren't I? Are you? Draven turned to face her fully. Because Magnus's offer still stands. Ambassador, traveling between territories. making a difference on a scale larger than one pack. It's a good offer, Liana. Important work. And He paused, something raw flickering across his face. I won't stop you if you choose it. But you don't want me to. No, he admitted. I don't, which is selfish and stupid because that work would save lives and prevent wars. But selfishness doesn't care about logic. Liana's breath caught. This was the closest Draven had ever come to admitting what lay beneath all the protective instincts and defensive partnership. The closest he'd come to naming the thing neither of them had dared acknowledge. I need to know something, she said carefully. Am I just useful to you? Just a valuable asset that helped win a war and heal your warriors? Or am I— More, Draven interrupted, his voice rough. You're more. You've been more since you stood in my council chamber and volunteered yourself as bait. Since you healed warriors when you could barely stand. Since you faced down Matthias without flinching. He stopped, jaw clenched, struggling with words that didn't come easily to a man who'd built himself from stone and will. I care, he finally said, about you. Not just what you can do, not just how you've helped my pack, about you. The woman who throws water basins at assassins and argues with alpha kings and refuses to break even when everything demands she bend. I care. And if you choose to leave, to take Magnus's offer and travel the territories, I'll support that decision, but I'll also spend every moment you're gone wishing you were home. Home. Not Bloodridge Keep, not the Northern Territories. Home. Liana felt tears prick her eyes. I'm not leaving. Draven's entire body went still. What? I'm not taking the ambassador position. I'm not joining another pack. I'm staying at Bloodridge. She reached out and took his hand, her fingers small against his scarred palm. Because you're right. I could do important work as an ambassador, could save lives and prevent wars, but I'd be doing it alone, traveling between worlds without belonging to any of them. And I'm tired of being alone, tired of not belonging. She squeezed his hand. You gave me a home when my own family threw me away. You stood beside me when assassins came. You claimed me as pack in front of an army. You made me feel like I mattered, not because of what I could do, but because of who I am. So yes, I'm staying. If you'll have me. Draven's laugh was surprised and genuine. Liana, I've been trying to figure out how to convince you to stay since the moment Magnus made that offer. If I'll have you is not the question. The question is whether you understand what you're choosing. I do. Her voice was certain. I'm choosing pack over politics. I'm choosing connection over influence. I'm choosing you over everyone else who wants to use me for their own purposes, no matter how noble. She smiled. I'm choosing home. Draven stood abruptly, pulling her to her feet and into an embrace that was fierce and warm and utterly safe. Around them, the celebration continued, but Liana was aware only of him, the solid strength of his arms, the steady beat of his heart, the way he held her like she was precious beyond measure. Then you're mine, he said against her hair. My mate, my partner, my equal. And I will defend that claim until the mountains crumble. Dramatic, Liana murmured. I'm an alpha king. Dramatic comes with the territory. She laughed, the sound bright and free, and felt something inside her, some last piece of armor she'd worn since childhood, finally crack and fall away. She was home. Not because of a treaty or political arrangement, not because she had nowhere else to go, but because she'd chosen it, fought for it, earned it, and been chosen in return. The journey back to Bloodridge Keep was different from the one that had brought them north. Warriors sang as they traveled, their voices carrying across mountain valleys. The weight of siege and conspiracy had lifted, replaced by something lighter. Hope, maybe. Or just the simple relief of survival. When they finally crested the ridge overlooking Bloodridge territory, Liana felt her chest tighten with emotion. The keep stood proud against the mountain backdrop, its gates open, smoke rising from chimneys. Warriors on the walls waved as they spotted the returning party. Welcome home, Draven said softly. And it was. Truly, completely home. They entered to a celebration that rivaled anything at Iron Peak Hold. The warriors who'd remained to defend the keep had prepared a feast. Banners hung from the walls, not just Bloodridge colors, but symbols from every pack in the alliance. a show of unity in solidarity. Garen, the first warrior Lyanna had healed, approached with a formal bow. Lady Lyanna, on behalf of everyone you saved, everyone you protected, everyone you stood beside, welcome home. Bloodridge Pack is honored to call you one of us. Others echoed the sentiment. Warriors she'd healed, guards who'd fought beside her during the assassination attempt, kitchen staff who'd watched her expose traitors. One by one, they acknowledged her, not as an outsider or a political tool, as Pack. That night, Draven gathered the entire keep in the Great Hall for a formal announcement. We've survived something that should have destroyed us, he said, his voice carrying to every corner. Poison, conspiracy, siege, betrayal, and we survived because we stood together, because we refused to break, because one Omega had the courage to do what was right, even when everything demanded she stay silent. He turned to Lyanna, his ice-blue eyes holding hers. Lyanna Vire came to us as a stranger, a treaty obligation, someone we didn't want and didn't trust. But she proved herself through action, not words, through sacrifice, not demands, through courage we could all learn from. So tonight, I make this formal. Draven took her hand and raised it high. Before this pack, before the Alliance, before any kingdom that dares to challenge us, I claim Lyanna as my mate, my equal, my partner in all things. She is Bloodridge, she is Pack, and anyone who threatens her threatens all of us. The hall erupted in cheers, warriors pounded tables, voices rose in celebration, and Lyanna stood at the center of it all, hand clasped in Draven's, feeling more seen and valued than she'd ever felt in her entire life. Later, when the celebration had quieted and warriors had dispersed to their quarters, Lyanna stood on the battlements, looking out over the dark mountains. The stars were brilliant overhead, undimmed by southern city lights. The wind was cold but clean, carrying the scent of pine and snow. Draven joined her, wrapping his cloak around her shoulders. Regrets? He asked quietly. None, she said honestly. This is where I'm meant to be. Even though it's harsh and cold and constantly under threat, especially because of that. She leaned against him. In the South, I was comfortable and miserable. Here, I'm challenged and fulfilled. I'll take harsh truth over comfortable lies any day. Good. His arm tightened around her. Because I have plans for you, Omega. Expanding the healer's wing, training other pack members in basic healing techniques, establishing medical treaties with Alliance packs. You're going to be very busy. Sounds perfect. They stood in comfortable silence, watching the night settle over their territory, their home, their future. In the valley below, Bloodridge Keep's lights glowed warm against the darkness. Warriors walked the walls with confidence restored. The gates stood open but guarded, welcoming but not naive. This was a pack that had been tested and had emerged stronger, all because one unwanted Omega had refused to accept the role assigned to her, had chosen courage over compliance, had turned sacrifice into strength. The winter wind howled through the mountains, carrying stories that would be told for generations. Stories of the healing wolf, the Omega who saved a dying pack, the bride who became a warrior, the sacrifice who became a legend. But Lyanna didn't think about legacy or legend. She thought about tomorrow, about the warriors she'd heal and the meals she'd share, and the life she'd build in this harsh, beautiful place beside a king who saw her as an equal. She thought about home and smiled. Because against all odds, against every expectation, against the cruelty of kingdoms and the brutality of frontier survival, she'd found where she belonged. Not through submission or compromise, through courage, through choice, through love earned in the fires of shared struggle. The southern kingdoms had sent her north to die. Instead, she'd taught them all what it meant to truly live.